There are many definitions of sustainability. Here at Sembcorp, sustainability is safeguarding the future. To us, that future is bright. We harness the power of the sun and wind, design low-carbon sustainable solutions for green urban cities, and lay the foundation for generations to come. Sustainability is innovation, challenging the norms and leading disruption. We innovate to solve complex global problems. We use our experiences to create opportunities from challenges. Sustainability is about the communities. We care for the communities and aim to improve their quality of life. We forge strong partnerships and leverage our platforms in the region to deliver sustainable solutions. Our success is founded upon the trust from the communities we serve. Sustainability is about our people. Our success is bolstered by the strength and energy of one Sembcorp team, a team that can thrive in the current and future world. Sustainability is not just a catchphrase. To us, sustainability is our business.
Good morning, good afternoon, and a very good evening to all our friends around the globe. Warm greetings from the Asia-Europe Foundation in Singapore. We are happy you can join us for today's roundtable. But before we begin, please allow me to provide some brief guidelines. You may submit your questions using the SIEW virtual platform, Swapcard, throughout the duration of this roundtable. Please kindly indicate your name and which country you are from so we can make the session as interactive as possible. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Morikawa Toru, Executive Director of AEF, to deliver the opening speech. Ambassador Morikawa?
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished participants, on behalf of the AEF Foundation, I wish you a very good afternoon from Singapore. Let me start by thanking the organizers of the 2021 Singapore International Energy Week, SIEW, for giving AEF the opportunity to host this roundtable to address the important topic of how do we accelerate the transition to a green economy. The green economy is a key area for many countries around the world to address the climate change issue. Let me begin by briefly introducing AEF. AEF is an intergovernmental not-for-profit organization and the sole permanent institution in the Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM, a dialogue process involving the ministers and leaders, namely heads of states or governments. AEF promotes the dialogue and the cooperation between Asians and Europeans in 7 thematic areas, including the sustainable development and climate change as one of the most pressing common global challenges. Distinguished participants, the climate change issue can only be sustainably addressed in the context of innovation in different aspects throughout the energy industries. The current surge in the energy price reminds us of the necessity to adapt a balanced and holistic approach to the transition to a green economy. With that in mind, and in keeping with the theme of the CIEW, we have asked our panel of experts to share their views with particular emphasis on the aspiration for the future energy industry focusing on job creation and incentives to assist economies that are strongly dependent on fossil fuels to accelerate their transition to a green economy. This needs to be done while the developing countries are foreseeing the rapid increase in the demand for energy. This roundtable will also look at training and advances in technologies that could help aspiring countries leapfrog some of the stages of the transition process. Financing would be another key factor in terms of what more affluent countries can do, together with relevant international and private sector financial institutions, to facilitate the global move towards a cleaner and greener energy economy. While countries continue to hold differences of opinion on how to combat climate change, I believe no country would disagree with me when I say that COVID-19 pandemic is not slowing down climate change. Economic recovery from the pandemic should be green in nature so that countries can use their limited resources and time in a sustainable manner. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but it would be useful for all countries to exchange the good practices and to think about this idea and how to apply it. The SIW Roundtable is also timely, being held just a few days before COP26. It will be a very important occasion for delegates to discuss how to accelerate the levels of the ambition toward the zero-emission society in the very midst of the energy shortage for the coming winter. I myself will go to Glasgow to participate in the COP26 related event and to exchange views with different stakeholders. And I believe that the outcome of our discussion here will be very useful in the discussion there. Therefore, we hope today's roundtable will produce practical ideas and possible solutions, accelerating the transition to a green economy. Your questions and interactions with a panel of eminent speakers will contribute to the discussion. Let me close my remark by wishing all of you an active discussion and fruitful outcome ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Morikawa, for your pertinent opening remarks. I now hand the floor over to AEF Deputy Executive Director, Ambassador Leon Faber, the moderator of today's roundtable. Ambassador Faber.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Toru, also for the introduction. And I am, of course, very honored to, on behalf of ASEF, to host this roundtable as one of the events of the Singapore International Week 2021. And as Toru just mentioned, the topic is how do we accelerate to a transition, the transition to a green economy. So today we are looking forward to a very lively discussion and engaging discussion involving all our four panelists with the audience. So please be active, and as Lawrence mentioned before, send us your questions that you may have, and we will pick them up and address them to our four panelists. Let me just say briefly that we have indeed four panelists. First of all, the Ambassador Jean-Paul Zenninger, my colleague and friend, who is the ambassador of Luxembourg to Thailand, but also to Singapore and some other countries in the region. He will give us, of course, the perspective of the Luxembourgish government in this very important area. Then we have Madame Kotami Chantamalin, who is the Deputy Director General in the Department of Planning and Cooperation of the Ministry of Energy and Mines of the Lao PDR. Our third speaker is Dr. Song Lei Lei, He's the Director of Economic Analysis and Operational Support of the Asian Development Bank. And last but not least, we have Ms. Jen Tan, who is of the Sembcorp Industries Head of Integrated Solutions from Singapore. So let me first give the floor to Ambassador Senninger, who has a very long career as a diplomat and has had many overseas assignments as Luxembourg ambassador to Spain, to the United States, Canada, Mexico, and he has also had a very high level positions in the government of Luxembourg as Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also of the government as a whole. So Jean-Paul Senninger is certainly well positioned to give us the overall policies of the government of Luxembourg, who of course also has to integrate that in the overall European policies of what we call the Green Deal. So without further ado, I would hand over the floor to Ambassador Senninger, please.
Well, thank you, Leo, for your kind introduction. And thank you also for inviting me to this very interesting and timely forum discussing on how to accelerate the energy transition to a green economy. Well, when reflecting on this, Luxembourg, as any other country, had to take into account the specificities of our situation, as well as the structure of our economy, our energy consumption, and the path we wanted to travel. We knew that the profound transformation of a country is a long process, and that as a government, you have the obligation to harness the evolution into the right direction. Being a dynamic economy, Luxembourg's GDP grew by 30%, and its population increased by a quarter over the last decade, the fastest population growth in any country. Over the same period, total energy consumption declined by 7%, indicating a decoupling of energy demand from GDP and population growth. The country also achieved a 25% reduction in greenhouse gases emissions compared to 2005, while the share of renewables in total energy supply jumped by 300% from, well, a very low 3.5% to still a too low 11%. As part of the 2018 coalition agreement, the government declared to do everything in its power to respect the Paris Agreement and take into account the conclusions of the intergovernmental experts on climate change. So the recently adopted National Energy and Climate Plan defines the framework for Luxembourg's energy and climate policy up to 2030 in accordance. This plan is part of a holistic approach aiming at a successful transition to a truly sustainable economy and way of living for my country. In September 2015 already, the government and the private sector jointly embarked on a study entitled The Third Industrial Revolution Strategy in close collaboration with the US economist Jeremy Rifkin and a pool of experts. The overall objective of this initiative is to transform the economy and society of the Grand Duchy before 2050, making it a truly sustainable society. Following the completion of the study, the government produced a strategic master plan and guidelines for the future development of the country. It focuses on 9 areas. Energy in the first place, because it binds everything together, but also mobility, building, food, industry, finance, smart economy, and circular economy. For each of these areas, a strategy highly complementary to those of the other areas has been designed. Luxembourg's energy system at the beginning of the process was characterized by high import dependence and reliance on fossil fuels. Some 95% of our energy supply, well, 100% for oil, natural gas, and biofuels, and 86% of electricity are imported. Oil is by far the dominant energy source, covering most transportation demand, as well as notable shares of heating demands in the residential and commercial sectors. Natural gas is the second largest energy source, covering large shares of industrial, residential, and commercial demand. So under these circumstances, energy savings and energy efficiency became my country's main concern, and together with the massive development of renewable energies and their integration into the energy network, the development of decentralized energy production and storage, and the use of more sustainable means of transport, the only solution to our problem. Therefore, we embarked upon that journey. So in the light of the pressing climate crisis, my government wishes to further accelerate the energy transition. And our climate and energy policies are essentially based on improving energy efficiency, promoting renewable energies, and promoting more sustainable public and individual mobility. These are the areas where change produces the best results in our context. So Luxembourg's ambition today is to be a leader in the European energy transition and to become a country of climate solutions. Against this backdrop, it is also necessary to step up research and development efforts in order to preserve and develop modern industrial activity in Luxembourg. The Energy and Climate Plan will therefore also have the potential to make Luxembourg a hub for startups and climate-friendly businesses. It is of essence as well to build on the strength and specific know-how of your economy in order to succeed and build clusters that can grow and mutually sustain each other. Well, I believe, therefore, it comes as no surprise to you that the development of green and sustainable finance, building on the expertise of our financial services industry, has become a cornerstone of our strategy. In 2016 already, we created the Luxembourg Green Exchange, the world's first stock exchange to deal exclusively with securities related to climate change. It currently lists over $320 billion dollars worth of green bonds. And LGX is the dedicated platform for issuers and investors focused on green instruments, with over 750 securities denominated in 32 countries nowadays. This represents a 50% global market share for green bonds and attracts major actors such as the World Bank, the EIB, the ADB, and many sovereign issuers alongside major corporations. But however, back to energy and Luxembourg's national energy and climate plan. The government has adopted a 2030 target to reduce emissions by 55% versus 2005, which exceeds the 30% reduction required by EU regulations. And if all countries were to adopt the same reductions, the global rise of temperatures could be contained to just below 2 degrees, set as the upper target by the Paris Accord. The plan contains as well a 2030 renewable energy target of 25% of global final consumption. Luxembourg is pushing for net zero greenhouse gases emissions and 100% renewable electricity by 2050. These ambitious targets will require a significant shift in our carbon-intensive energy mix, particularly in relation to the heavy reliance on oil in the transport sector. To succeed in these ambitions, we have introduced numerous support schemes to achieve these targets and long-term goals. The government currently provides support for renewables through a favorable fed-in tariff and premium tariff for electricity generated from renewables, as well as investment subsidies supporting deployment of renewable energy projects. In 2018, we introduced a tender system for solar power projects and prepared legislation to support self-consumption of renewable electricity and encourage consumers to be active market participants, both as consumers and as producers. Under this law, electricity from renewable sources directly consumed at the generation side is exempt from grid fees, which is a powerful incentive to promote decentralized production and storage. Prime House is Luxembourg's main scheme to support energy efficiency renovations and favoring zero-emission constructions. The scheme provides for generous investment subsidies, while the Climate Bank program provides low-rate climate loans to encourage residents and companies to undertake energy efficiency constructions and renovations, which allow at the same time for the fostering of considerable expertise and job creation at virtually no costs, since the energy savings pay for the invest over the years. We have also embraced an e-mobility initiative aimed at electrification of the transport sector. The goal is for half of all vehicles registered in Luxembourg to be electric vehicles by 2030. We are supporting e-mobility with subsidies for purchasing electric vehicles by investments in a vast national charging network, as well as encouraging a shift from private vehicles to electrified public transport. The goal is to increase the use of public transport by 50% from 2017 to 2025 through investment in park and ride centers and in a major reworking of bus, train, and tram infrastructure. The main boost for sustainable transportation came also through the decision to make all public transportation free as of February last year. Since we expect sustained growth in electricity demand driven by increasing population and economic activity and by demand from e-mobility, heating and industry, the bar was set to cover over a third of 2030 electricity demand by renewables, mostly through solar and wind generation. Please bear in mind that Luxembourg's steel industry is all electric and accounts today for 40% of our energy consumption, making it potentially the most environment-friendly steel industry in the world. While being landlocked, Luxembourg is part of the North Sea Energy Cooperation, which has significant potential in renewable energy through the integration of large-scale offshore wind parks into the European energy market, as well as a more coordinated offshore grid development. So by 2030, the North Sea should cover up to 12% of total energy consumption in the European Union. But the low costs of energy continue to represent a significant barrier to achieving the energy sector targets, just as low fuel prices decrease the advantage of electric vehicles. So carbon pricing, therefore, offers a simple mechanism to drive behavior that supports the government's policy goals. And consequently, the carbon tax of 20 euros per ton this year will increase to 25 euros per ton in 2022 and to 30 euros per ton in 23 and so on. Well, I think my time is up now for the opening remarks. So I thank you for your attention and happy to accept questions afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean-Paul, for this indeed very comprehensive presentation of Luxembourg's policy in this area. I retain mainly, as you were saying in the beginning, on one side, the population growth, but also the consumption decline. But at the same time, that seems to me a very important fact, is this holistic approach where all different policies and sectors are indeed combined in the master plan. And you were mentioning energy, mobility, and so on. But at the same time, of course, also Luxembourg has a very highly integrated economy, also the importance of research and development and the very ambitious targets. And I must say, because Luxembourg is of course my home as well, when I was home in the summer and could use the public free transport, that is really something. I can only encourage everyone, go to Luxembourg and experience that. It's honestly, it made even the headlines, I think, in the New York Times. So anyway.
It's small savings, but it's a lot of fun.
Yes, it is really, and it's actually, yeah, you don't need a car. So thanks for that. But we will come next to Madame Kotami Chantamalin, who is as I said, the Deputy General Director of the Department of Planning and Cooperation of the Ministry of Energy and Mines of the Lao PDR. And she is also the alternate ASEAN senior official on energy leader. So Madame Kotami has been working a lot with Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore on the Thailand-Malaysia-Singapore Power Integration Project, which is of course a very important and she gives us the perspectives of that cooperation. And we know, of course, also that Laos is a very producing a lot of hydropower. So we are looking forward to your presentation, Madame Kotami. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all delegated. Today is my pleasure and honor for being a representative for the Ministry of Energy and Mines, Lao PDR, to participate the Thinktank's roundtables where could share views on how do we accelerate the energy transition to a green economy. Before I start, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Asian Yellow Foundations co-organized with the Energy Market Authority for preparing and organizing this excellent event. Recognizing that the energy sector in our regions has been significantly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In medium and long term, we need to pursue sustainable energy policy to achieve economic recovery and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to ensure stable supply and affordable clean energy that support economic activity that daily life. Based on energy demands expect to increase double by 2035, Southeast Asia must accelerate private and government investment, especially by encouraging to use renewable energy efficiency to guarantee by using clean energy and environmentally friendly in future. To engage with a green growth direction, the government of Lao PDR has always focused on the sustainable development as a key issue. We have attached great importance to mainstreaming sustainable development goals, attracting to our nation development plan. The country has determined the development of the source of electricity power generation by using the natural water resource as the key potentials of Laos PDR. aiming to optimize and utilize the natural resource in effective way, ensure environmentally friendliness, and produce clean energy. Since the major of our hydropower plant is a run-of-river type, we could generate in the wet season and somehow facing the difficulty during the dry season. So alternative power generation source is needed in order to be the base load for us. Apart from hydropower potentials, we also possess potentials for the solar and wind power development in the north and south of Laos that have a high potential. We are now to have a six solar power plant. At the same time, electric vehicle, we also be out the accomplishment that the government issued the strategy on promotion of green energy for transportation development and plan 2025, strategy 2030, and vision 2050, which set the target to achieve more than 30% of the vehicle throughout the country by 2030. The government also issued the national energy policy of the Laos PDR, aiming to the development of the sector according to the socio-economic development plan and to support the implementations of important documents of the Ministry of Energy and Mines, such as the vision to the 2030, the development strategy to 2025, and the five-year energy and mines development plan. For the end, I strongly believe that through the forum, we benefit us with the outcome that the mainstream for the favorable and effective working together to develop sustainable energy for everyone. And also would like to highlight the importance of strong partnership and cooperation between country and region to increase collective efforts towards a global, green, and resilient recovery from the COVID-19. So once again, I would like to wish a distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a happy, healthy, and safe from COVID pandemic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Kotami, and thank you also for giving us the overview of the Lao policy, Lao PDR's policy on that, in the use of natural resources and in an efficient way, and also the importance of developing new energy forms, renewables, and of course also the aspect of international cooperation. So thank you very much for that. Now I will introduce our third speaker, who is Dr. Song Lei. He's the Director of Economic Analysis and Operational Support of the Asian Development Bank. He leads a team of more than 20 economists supporting ADB's operations, such as conducting research on development issues in Asia and the Pacific. Dr. Song joined the ADB as an economist in the former Office of Regional Economic Integration before moving to the Office of the President as a senior advisor to the ADB President. And before assuming his current post, he was Regional Economic Advisor for South Asia, based in New Delhi, covering Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So, Dr. Song, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And first, let me thank the organizer, Asia-Europe Foundation, for inviting ADB and myself to this very important discussion. And this is a really important issue, and the COP26 is coming, and we definitely need to debate important issues, and then we can accelerate our transition to the green economy. So my remarks would cover 3 points. Most of them would be on the economic side. So the first point I would like to cover is we need to accelerate investment in climate change and the green economy. And we know the energy mix in Asia in 2019, the 75% of primary energy supply came from fossil fuels, 36% from coal, 23% from oil, and 16% from gas. So 3/4 of Asia's primary energy came from fossil fuel, and 20% from renewable. If we would like to reverse this mix, if we would like to get 75 from renewables, then we need a lot of investment. We need to mobilize resources and efforts to speed up our transition to the renewable energy. And then SDG 7, Sustainable Development Goal of 7, it's about affordable and clean energy, which set a target of universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy services for all by 2030. So we also need to keep that in mind. The reason is because currently about 940 million, so that's about close to 1 billion people in Asia and the Pacific still experience frequent interruptions. And about 350 million people don't enjoy an adequate electricity supply. And about 150 million people, mostly in South Asia, still have no access to electricity. So on the one hand, we need to transit to renewable. On the other hand, we still need to have energy access for all for the people in Asia and the Pacific. So 2 weeks ago, our president, ADB president, announced ADB is elevating its ambition to deliver climate financing to its developing member countries from $80 billion to $100 billion from 2019 to 2030. So that's, although it sounds a small increase, but $100 billion, that's a very significant chunk of ADB's investment in the region. So this is, we need to speed up our investment in climate change. But then actually, retiring carbon-intensive energy assets, such as coal-fired power plants. I already said 36 of primary energy source in Asia came from coal. And retiring those carbon-intensive assets is also critical. So ADB is working on a so-called energy transition mechanism, which will accelerate the transition from coal to clean energy in Southeast Asia. And during the COP26 on the 3rd of November, so ADB is going to launch this initiative along with Indonesia and the Philippine governments. So basically, we would like to combine concessional financing resources and commercial financing, then to retire the coal generation assets earlier, and then to invest in renewable energy. So this is a innovative financing model. We would involve private sector, philanthropy investors, as well as donor countries. And so this is going to be launched during the COP26 on the 3rd of November. So this is my first point. We need to accelerate investment. But actually, tackling climate change is also a huge macroeconomic shock to the world economy. Why? Because carbon, which embodied in almost all our products and the services, because we are using electricity, and electricity generated from the fossil fuel. And therefore, because in the past production process, this negative externality is not priced. So if we introduce carbon pricing, which is necessary to let us accelerate our transition to the green economy, and then this represents a huge supply shock to the negative supply shock to the world economy. Recently, IMF produced a paper, and they assume probably a necessary condition for carbon pricing is $75 a ton. If we assume such a price, carbon price, $75 a ton, then in 2019, globally, we generated 36.4 gigatons of carbon emissions in 2019. And if you use this carbon price, then that represents about between 3 to 4% of world GDP in 2019. And such a big number, it's actually is a negative supply shock. It's similar in the magnitude as the first oil shock in 1974. In 1974, the oil prices jumped from about $3, between $3 and $4 per barrel, to about $11, which is about 3.5% of world GDP in the early 1970s. So this would be a huge shock to the world economy. In the past, we thought that low carbon transition would be a very slow process for carbon-intensive economies to gradually reduce emissions of greenhouse gas. But now, because of the decades of procrastination, it's actually turned expected a smooth transition into what is likely to be a very upward process. And we have already seen some indication signals from the global shortage of gas and the coal. So this is, we are already seeing some big shock to the economy. And with such a big negative shock to the economy, then definitely, unfortunately, it would represent a huge structural shift in the world economy. So that's my third point. So the world economy, because of this transition, and to manage such a transitioning period might be quite difficult. With such a carbon pricing and with such a negative supply shock, although we do have certain demand shock, investment boom in renewable and other climate and green technologies would also represent a positive shock to the world economy, but largely it would be a negative supply shock. And such a shock would also shift the world economic structure. And one of the very important structure shift would be on jobs. So many jobs related to the carbon-intensive industrials and services probably would be lost. And on the other hand, many jobs related to green economy, related to the renewable energy, and would be created. So there would be a huge shift of the labor from carbon-intensive sectors to carbon less intensive sectors, and which then require our whole economy to adjust and adapt. One of the very basic structure would be education. So our education sector has to produce the jobs to fit into the green economy, and then to retrain those people, they retired from the carbon-intensive industries to fit them with the skills can be adapted to the green economy. So such a job, we already see some new jobs created in the renewable industry. And it's probably, according to some estimate, the renewable energy sector probably would create 24 million jobs by 2030. But until now, we are not sure how many jobs would be lost associated with carbon-intensive industrial and sectors, both manufacturing as well as services. So it's still a very big areas we haven't got into much research and much understanding. International organizations only just started to look at into the climate change as a macroeconomic shock to the world economy. So let me conclude. I think I touch upon three points associated with transitioning to the green economy. One is we need to speed up our investment in renewable energy and in green economy. Second, this transitioning period would be representing a very negative supply shock to the world economy. And the third point, because such a negative shock to the economy, and the economy would undergo a structural shift, and many jobs would be lost and many jobs would be created. And then our education system, our other public services would also adjust and adapt to this transitioning to the low carbon world. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Song. This is a very interesting presentation and very relevant that you make on these 3 points. And I'm sure that we will have questions regarding also, especially on the third point, on the transition for the job transitions. I think that is obviously something that many countries are very, very much interested, because obviously you need different qualifications and skills in these new economies. So thank you very much for hinting already to that. And as I said, we will certainly come back to that with questions later on. But before that, let me introduce our fourth and final, but certainly not the least of our panelists today, Ms. Jen Tan from the Sembcorp Industries, Head of Integrated Solutions, Singapore and Southeast Asia Market, Renewables and Environment Business. So Ms. Tan is responsible for growing the portfolio of offerings on the Sembcorp suite of sustainable solutions in Singapore and Southeast Asia. These include integrating energy, water, waste, and digital solutions that help customers meet their environmental sustainability targets. And under her leadership, Ms. Tan has successfully grown the business to become one of the largest players in Singapore with over 11 years of experience in the solar industry. So I'm very happy to have indeed a representative of the private sector here. And I think to make also the link between policies and politics and how to implement all of that. So Ms. Tan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me on this panel. So I'd like to do some short introduction about Sembcorp. So Sembcorp, in Sembcorp, sustainability is our business. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, at a glance, Sembcorp actually operates in 11 countries. We are Temasek owned 49.5%, and we have more than 5,000 employees. We also have a market capitalization of 3.6 billion, and we are listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange. So next slide, please. In our businesses, we actually have renewables, conventional energy, and we are also in the integrated urban solutions. So in renewables, we actually do both utility scale and commercial and industrial rooftop, and then we also have energy storage systems. We have utility scale generation and co-generation and steam generation, etc. for conventional energy. And we are also in the urban business and in the water waste to resource business. So these are a couple of businesses that we have that we have in place. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll move on to little more details for renewables. Next slide, please. Okay, in renewables, we are actually currently a growing regional leader. We have more than 3,500 megawatts of gross capacity. A lot of it is in wind in India and China, and they are all under self-O&M in India. For solar, we have about 797 in India, Singapore, and China. India, Singapore, and Vietnam. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is we are leading solar energy player in the small little Singapore with close to 400 megawatts. And we also have energy storage system in UK, about 120 megawatt hour. Next slide, please. Okay, renewable energy is the in thing, but it's also Sembcorp's focus. We are actually planning to grow up to 10 gigawatts by 2025 through focusing on organic growth, selective M&A and partnerships, as well as capital recycling. Next slide, please. I think a deeper dive into our solar portfolio. Next slide. Okay, we have, like I mentioned earlier on, 797 megawatts in India, Vietnam, and Singapore. We have it on rooftops, floating, as well as utility scale. And actually, it will be interesting to know that in Singapore, we actually have solar on 2,500 rooftops. And we are contributing to 25% of Singapore's national 2025 target. Next. Okay, how do we, what kind of solutions and what kind of capabilities we provide in our solar energy portfolio? Basically, it's end-to-end. Of course, we do business development in which we focus a lot on pre-sales, technical know-how, and the ability to help customers to become net zero, to partner them in their journey for sustainability, etc. So I think we provide different kinds of solutions for different customers. We also do in-house project development. In other words, we have our own internal technical and engineering skill sets, and we actually do value engineering, and hence I think the main focus here is really to bring value to our customers through emphasis on safety and quality. For all solar plants, they are expected to last for 25 to 30 years. And I think a wrong decision or a mistake at the start can be very costly, because it's going to be a long and painful journey. It's actually very similar in layman terms, marrying the wrong wife or marrying the wrong husband. You have more than 30 years of pain. So for solar, if you choose the wrong partner, wrong solutions, and wrong system integration, the pain will go on. And solar, you cannot divorce, because the thing already stuck and already constructed. So I think a lot of emphasis for us is put on project development and asset management, where we partner our customers or government for more than 25 years kind of relationship. Okay, and the other thing that is important to know is, because solar has got, especially for the rooftop business, right, it's so fragmented in more than 2,500 rooftops. It's important to have a good digital analytics system, so that we can have detailed, actionable insights and full control, and make sure that our plants are actually operating fine and well maintained. So because of these capabilities, we actually are winning contracts. We are able to optimize costs and pass on the value to our customers and our stakeholders, as well as to improve the generation of our assets. Next. So, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's important to add value to our customers, and the way to go is to improve, especially through smart technologies in solar. Next. Yeah, and we are dealing with a lot of data based on the power meter, the water meter, the production equipment, the EV charging that we are installing, the solar generation. All these actually are data that we can collect via a gateway. We actually go through third-party systems. We process the data. We send information to our PSO. PSO is Power System Operator, which is our government. And then through this, the output actually is monitoring for our own operations maintenance team to ensure that our plants perform at tip-top condition. We also provide this information and data for our client to ensure that the green energy that they are receiving is according to plan, and they are also able to aggregate the information for their own internal sustainability journey, and of course for the government and authority to know that the generation and the performance of the systems, how they are generally doing in Singapore. Next. Excuse me. We have also got in-house tools where, like I mentioned, solar monitoring and control. We have got solar and analytics, where we use predictive monitoring technology to improve the performance of the system through the least interference. So we use data to tell us when to do maintenance. We use data to predict the performance of the system, etc. We have project management, Internet of Things, connectivity, etc. All these are things that we are trying to, or we have already built in-house and deliver the value to our customers. There are things that we don't do in-house, but we also partner with our partners to provide these solutions to our partners, like sustainability tracking, building energy management system. How do we do metering and billing for customers who have more than one tenant? We also provide EV charging for vehicles, and recently we also have EV charging for our waste collection trucks and so on. So I think the integrated digital solutions is really for improved productivity, for convenience, and of course efficient production of the systems that we already have. Next. So this is just a blown up version of the solar monitoring dashboard that we have. We can see on a map the various assets that we have. this map can be global. So in Singapore, I've got this office where I've got the map and also the view of the assets that we have all around the world. Alarms will sound when there's a system issue, and of course we also track sustainability statistics on this monitoring dashboard. Next. Okay, this case study is something that I'm extremely proud of, because this 60 megawatt peak solar plant was actually commissioned in June this year, and I think our Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong graced the event on the 14th of July. It's a 60 megawatt peak system, one of the largest inland floating solar PV systems. Total, we have 122,000 panels, over 45 football fields or 45 hectares. We actually went through many challenges to get this solar plant installed. Not only the COVID situation where we had workers issue, we were worried about workers being infected. We were worried about the safety and the health of the people working on the plant. We had massive supply chain issues. There was short of ships. There was short of solar panels. You name it, and we had it for this solar plant. But we still managed to complete everything in less than 8 months, excluding the EIA study. EIA study took about 2 to 3 months pre-construction. So I think it's an achievement for our team. I think we spent a lot of time looking at how to improve the productivity. We started off by being able to assemble 1,000 panels per day. And with the same set of workers, a newly designed custom-built jig, we managed to improve the productivity by almost 50%. I think we increased from 1,000 to 1,005 to 2,000 at peak. So every day we were able to churn out 2,000 panels installation on site. We also use, the advanced drone. Actually, we use electroluminescence imaging technology for the drone to check out the health and life of the solar panel. It's just like taking X-ray of the body, right? You check the inner body. So for this, we check the inner health of the solar panel by flying the drone in the middle of the night. So we can see the electroluminescence imaging of each solar panel at the beginning of its life, so that we can maintain the life for the next 25 years. Drones are also used for maintenance, to check for bird droppings, to check for the position of the solar panels, to make sure that everything is in place. And of course, the most important is our solar digital monitoring platform, where we monitor the generation on a real-time basis. Next. The ability to complete the solar floating solar on time is because we actually spend a lot of time and effort to develop capabilities within our team. Next. Okay, in Singapore, we built up a sustainability workforce. We have developed 30 courses, of which 20 is in-house. We participate in the SSG Queen Bee as a solar industry leader, where we also help our contractors, our subcontractors, to be able to be trained through online academy platform. This is in partnership with Singapore Poly. We have invested 1.4 million in WSQ support. We have this UPage MOU ceremony. We are partnering Institute of Higher Learnings and training providers to develop courses to train our workforce. And we have invested more than 4,000 hours in 2020 on reskilling and upskilling workforce. And last but not least, we actually continuously train our partners to be certified installers. So they are not a part of Sembcorp working employees, but every time they come on board with Sembcorp for a certain project, we will provide them with whatever training that is required to upskill themselves to do the project. Next. A few examples of what we do with Institute of Higher Learnings is, like, for example, on the left side, we set up a Sustainability Solution Center for ITE College East. This is not only to prepare the ITE students with the essential skills and competency of the area. It also features the latest developments, technological developments. And I think the most interesting point is we have trainees that come and join us in actual field work every year. And we also have people who are interested in mid-career changes to attend trainings that's conducted at this center. Just now I mentioned the large-scale 60 megawatt plant. We actually had many students that came together with us to learn, about the process of building a floating solar plant in Singapore. I think that was an eye-opener for the students. We also partner with Singapore Poly to actually commercialize solar panel recycling. I think just looking at the solar floating solar site that we have, we already have 122,000 panels. 20 years later, where are we going to put these panels, and how are we going to deal with it when it reaches the end of life? So we can foresee that coming, and it's not only from Sembcorp, it's also from everybody in the industry that's building solar. How do we deal with end-of-life solar panels? So we are working very closely with Singapore Poly to look at solar panel recycling. And with this, we actually do the end-to-end, and we are very responsible, and we recycle the solar panel back into its original state, where we can recover, I think, more than 90% of the material back into silver, aluminum, silicon, and into its original raw materials. And these raw materials can then be used for other purpose, all back to solar panel production. So I think this is a very important project, and we are very proud to partner Singapore Poly for this. Next. So I think that comes to the end of my introduction on Sembcorp and our Singapore solar journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tan, for this presentation. And I think we have here a very good example of how complex such entrepreneurship can be. And I mean, coming back to the remark from before on education and skills development. So I think that is a very good example. So now we come to our question and answer session. We will, of course, invite all participants to participate. Send us your questions, and we will allocate them to the 4 panelists. Maybe while waiting a little bit also to that, I would try to ask myself one question, and that is, of course, a very comprehensive one, and maybe we can have first indications also from all the 4 panelists, is on, because I think we have representatives here from, on one side, the government who have, and on one side, a highly integrated economy, on the other side, a more natural resource-based economy, and then on the other side, of course, an international financial institution and the private sector. So now the big thing is, of course, we see this is a comprehensive approach. Holistic approaches need to be taken. And again, I think one of the most important aspects is, of course, the jobs and the economy, and how do we get the people there? I mean, if we looked at the last presentation of Ms. Tan, and we see all the technicians we need, all the, how do we get, I mean, I exaggerate a little bit, but how do we get people from, let's say, excavating coal and fuel from oil into solar energy? I think that is also a big effort that is being needed. So maybe a first question on that: how can governments and private sector and international financial institutions work together in order to achieve these results? So I throw it to all of you. Just raise your hand, and if you have something you want to share with us, so please, while we wait for other questions to come in. Yes, Ms. Tan.
Maybe I can share, I've been in solar industry since 2008 or 2009. It first started I was formerly from REC, a Norwegian company, and then after that, the industry started to grow, and it ramped up really so fast, and suddenly we see many Chinese solar panel providers in China with them. In REC, I was producing 800 megawatts, and I was so proud. And then suddenly people are in the gigawatts. So we were very far. I think the problem with growing too fast is quality is normally being neglected. So the same goes for solar power plants. I think on one hand, it is not difficult as compared to coal mining or even mining and all that. But on the other hand, it's very easy to make mistakes. Simple things like, not connecting the cables properly can actually result in, safety incidents, fires, plant issues and all that. So it is not like the big and complicated industries like semicon or like what you said, coal mining, where the skill is not easy to acquire. But in solar, it is very easy to make mistakes. So I think we need to emphasize a lot on, general workers, definitely you have the general worker training. Electrical, you need to have the electrical training. But I feel that as we spur the growth of renewable energy, and many countries are talking about it, especially in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, we suddenly saw the growth of many gigawatts over a short period of time. There are very good installations. There are also installations that we have seen that is way below par, because people just thought that it's like, I'm not sure if you know the toy Lego. It's like, it's like Lego. We just build everything together and voila, you have a solar plant. I think that is something that we need to be worried about, because the more you have of that and the more safety and fire incidents that you have will make people very defensive towards solar in their country. So the training, the upskilling of the general worker, the electrical people and the engineer, in my opinion, is extremely important for growth.
Thank you. Indeed, I fully agree with you. Maybe we have other comments on this question on Dr. Song or Ambassador Zanninger.
Well, if you may, I might share some experience from Luxembourg in retraining and training workers to make them fit for the next step of the economic evolution. And what we've learned from this process is that heavy government involvement is absolutely crucial in order to succeed in this endeavor. Because if you lose jobs in the old economy and you do not start retraining your people early enough in the process, you lose them forever. And then you do not only lose jobs, you do not only lose economic possibilities, but the society as a whole loses heavily in not taking all its members along on the journey to the new economy. Let's put it that way. So you're losing not only economically but also socially. The human cost of people not participating in the transition is enormous. So it's not only a moral but also a financial obligation for governments to be heavily engaged in training, retraining, and training people on the job. And it pays in the end. Whatever the cost of retraining your workers is in the end much more efficient than just ignoring the problem. And we've put tremendous efforts into training people while on the job, while transiting to the new economy, and it has allowed as to keep unemployment low, to keep the burden on the companies also very bearable, and the cost for the state budget was actually absolutely bearable, because the savings on all the other sides, in fact, paid for the costs of retraining our people, or parts of our people. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Song, I will give you the floor, but I would at the same time also immediately ask another question that we have received from the audience. In this context, I would like to ask, here we have one audience member who asked the question, but I would like to invite also the participants to tell us who they are, so that we know that. Dr. Song, in this regard also, because you were mentioning, of course, the need for finances and the need to do that also together with the private sector. So how do, in that regard, also international finance institutions work together with a private sector in order to create and promote what we call the PPPs, the public-private partnerships? So if you could reflect on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. So let me touch on these jobs issues and education first. Yeah, I agree with the previous speakers. So we need to spend a lot of money to retrain people, to refit people with new skills. Say, like in Bhutan, I traveled when I'm still live in India. Actually, I get this participation from India. I traveled to Bhutan quite often in my previous role. And Bhutan didn't have electrical vehicles before. So they didn't have technicians who can service electrical vehicles. And my colleague, the country director for Bhutan, when she moved to Thimphu, lived there, she bought an electrical vehicle with her, but then nobody could service that electrical vehicle, no technician around. So actually we end up, ADB spent a little bit money with some grant money from, I believe, from JECA. Along with JECA, then we trained technicians who can service electrical vehicles. I think that's JECA. So JECA, they bought some volunteers from Japan. Then they trained the mechanics to repair electrical vehicles. So this is a very good example. So we need, I think the new green economy probably is a very much serviced economy. It needs a lot of services, not only to service those final products, but also to service all these energy sources, because our new green energy might be a very distributed and decentralized sources. The solar rooftop would be on the tops of every household. And then you need a lot of services. And the electrical vehicles, they are not internal combustion engine vehicles, and they may need a lot for new services. So this technical and vocational skills training would be really important, so-called TVET. And ADB invests a lot in all our developing member countries. But even when we emphasize TVET training, but we cannot forget about the foundational training, primary and secondary education. Without good foundational training, I think it's really difficult to retrain people. Only with a very good primary and secondary education, then when they grow older, when they shift jobs, then they are more easily adapted to new jobs with new training. So we need to emphasize the importance of primary and secondary education, the foundational training. Okay, then let me come back to the question of the financing. So for international financial institutions, our main job is de-risking. So basically de-risking. When we say de-risking, so we mobilize capital from international financial markets, capital market. We issue bonds, and because we are AAA, and we can raise the funds at the lowest costs. So our funding cost usually just like at the level of LIBOR. Now we transit to a new benchmark. So it's almost the lowest cost you can get from international financial market. And then we lend this money to our developing member countries. So this is one part of the story of de-risking, and we can mobilize quite significant. But even very significant like ADB, every year we only can lend to our member countries about $22 billion. So last year we did a bit more, about $25 billion. But $25 billion is a drop in the ocean. And then another function we have is we partner with our private sector partners. And then we can utilize the various credit guarantee, credit enhancing tools, including guarantee, including co-financing. So various tools, or including syndicated loans, then to mobilize private sector financing to invest in those public sector projects. But also then we can also have a PPP projects, private-public partnership. We can develop those PP projects to let them become bankable projects, which private sector can invest. So we have various channels. The whole objective is try to mobilize as much as possible money from the private sector, from the financial market, that can be used to invest in renewable, to use in green economy, to use for even education. And we do have certain project, PPP, for education projects. So I stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Kotami, maybe you also have something to add on both of these questions if you want. Especially, I think that the Lao PDR, you're of course in a very specific situation. And also, I must say that as a former ambassador of the EU to the Lao PDR, we invested, of course, also a lot in primary sector, in primary education. So I would be very interested also to hear what you have to say on the training of people. And also, I think you have a great need for technicians in that area. So maybe you can give us your point of view as well. Thank you. I think you may still be muted. You have to.
So thank you very much for the questions. So I think there are several ways that the government and companies can work together to identify the job or create job to the green economy. The first option that it would be for the government to provide support in the policy making to assist the company and vocational to education institutions to conduct the investigative measures to identify what skills are lacking. Then the companies and the education institutes shall provide training or education credit for the student for the specific work in the green economy. Then the company would outsource or subcontract the SME and MSME to the platform, the work in the green economy and high students that have the graduate or can intern for the educational vocational institutes. And the second option is for the government to create private public partnership or PPP with the company. The company will identify which jobs needs to complete a specific task or project. The government can assist by the providing statistics or historical data on the current labor market. Within data that the company can identify what additional job or skill are needed and or rescue through the existing labor market. So that's my view apply this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have myself a question. Some of you have touched upon, of course, the energy transition and especially renewables, as renewables are not always permanent. And there is always, of course, on one side, the question of the storage. Some of you have also mentioned, I think Jean-Paul was, Ambassador Zenninger was talking on the private production of electricity and how you put it into the net outside. And I think also Ms. Tan was also speaking about that as well. So that is an aspect that I find very interesting, the decentralization, so to say, of the energy production as well. And at the same time, does that also have an impact, for instance, on job creations, especially in the, let's say, in the SMEs and the smaller companies? Because we know that, of course, generally speaking, jobs are created much more by smaller companies than by big international corporations. So if I could have some of your thoughts on those aspects, thank you very much. Maybe we start with Ms. Tan and then we make a turn. Everybody can give their thoughts on that. Thank you very much. Ms. Tan, please. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
so, sorry, just to be sure I got your question, you're asking about job creation through smaller companies than bigger companies, is it?
Well, actually two aspects. One is the job creation and for smaller companies, but that also the decentralization of energy production in the sense that when you have, for instance, rooftops and you have at some point you have more energy than you need, is it then possible to feed it into the network or the electrical net, and how do you measure that and how do you compensate, and so this aspect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the job nature and job scope have shifted. I mean, in my opinion, it has shifted. I mean, traditionally you have heavy, laborious work on site, keeping the plant up and running, production and productivity. These days, what is the most, interesting and popular job is the digital engineer next door. Everything is about digitalization. How to go green is about virtual PPAs. How to combat climate change if you don't have the roof is about renewable energy credits. How do you then track all this, right? Then, of course, in other industries, you have Bitcoin, blockchain, this and that. In the energy industry, you will have the same thing, to help people go green, to go net zero, people have to procure renewable energy credits. You have to make sure that the certificates are authentic. People actually check the meters and all that. And you have proper blockchain technology that aggregates all this information and in the end, there is data integrity. So I think it does create a lot of jobs, but a different kind. So and as more and more, as the technology or ramp up of renewable energy gets more and more, and more decentralization happens, you need a lot more data mining to make sure that people do have sufficient energy. People are able to track whether there's more or less of this kind and all that. So I think we have shifted in terms of the kind of skills that we need. And in my opinion, we are still at a very young and growing stage. And I think a lot more needs to be done in this area.
Thank you. Dr. Song, you want to come up first? Or?
Okay, let me come. Yeah, I think you raise a very interesting question, and also I touched upon earlier. So this decentralized or distributed energy generation, energy production, definitely would need local services, because each household would become an energy producer, not only a consumer but also energy producer. And then with each household, then you need to service all this each household. Whether it's a solar or even wind, I don't know, wind production probably would also be very distributed. And then if we get hydrogen in the future, hydrogen might become an energy storage in the future. Then the hydrogen cars hydrogen, using hydrogen to do all the other sorts of things, you need a lot of service jobs. And all these service jobs, once you get into the service jobs, usually SMEs are in a better position to provide those service jobs. And they have a comparative advantage against big companies because they can provide localized, can provide tailored services, and can respond really fast to the needs of the consumers. Then SMEs would be a much better position to provide those services. So the new green economy, I think we only now see only the tip of the new green economy, not only on the digital side, but also on other areas. We haven't seen the full picture yet. We don't know. It's a big transition. I think in the next 5, 10, 20 years, the economy would change dramatically. I think this transition to the new green economy would be much bigger than the transition we have witnessed after oil crisis in 1974. I was not in the generation. I'm a little bit younger than both gentlemen. You might have already experienced what you have seen in the 1970s, 1980s. And if you look back from 1990 and to look at what you had, the services products before 1970s, I think it's already a big change. But now we may expect much bigger changes. Digital plus distributed energy, then probably a lot of productions will become distributed, decentralized. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Song. I was not aware that we would see that it was so obvious that Jean-Paul and myself are older gentlemen. But apart from that, I can indeed remember the oil shock, and I must say that I enjoyed very much the Sunday free of cars that we had at the time, and at the same time, I must say I have over the decades I always thought, why did we not invest earlier in renewables? But that is, I think, partially a more political discussion that we will not go into here. But I give the floor to my companion, Jean-Paul.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Leon, reminding us about these days when we were able to ride our bikes in the middle of the city on weekends. But let's be honest, weren't we happy when all the cars were back? And so I believe we're all to blame a little bit for not having been pushing more and earlier for investments into renewable energy. But well, that's things of the past now. But I'm convinced that moving towards a green economy is, of course, a lot about new jobs that we didn't know they would exist 10 years ago. It's a lot about digitalization, new tools, and so on. It's about intelligent meters and a lot of things. But it's also about more traditional jobs. And especially speaking about Luxembourg, it's not only about decentralized energy production, it's also about renovating existing buildings. And there lies a huge potential of energy savings and energy efficiency, while at the same time creating a lot of jobs that are not highly technical. So they are evolving out of the traditional building into building industry. And there are a lot of jobs to be created in isolating, renovating houses, and that contribute a lot to energy efficiency and building new skills out of a very traditional industry. And of course, when you speak about each and every household becoming not only a consumer of electricity or energy, but also a producer, at the same time, the family car becomes part of the grid and can be used as a storage, be it for electricity, be it for hydrogen in the future. So the investment is not to be done twice or three times, but when you integrate the whole network together with your neighbors, you can actually store a lot of energy in the neighborhood, within your car, within your house, without having heavy investments or tools that need specific maintenance. And that's the good thing about the new grid. It's decentralized, and it can even move within the city or the country. So yes, it will be heavy investments, but it will also be investments into dual use equipment and much more efficient than you would think at first glance, because especially when it comes to investing into existing buildings, the cost for these investments will actually be paid over the years through energy savings. So it's, well, I wouldn't say all for free, but yeah, it's largely free. And even the benefit for the environment and the climate are certainly for free. And that's what amazes me always when I'm in Southeast Asia, to see how much energy is just lost, just spoiled because of inadequate isolation of the buildings and glass windows that are, well, not adequate to the environment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I have two questions that I want to combine, and I would like to start with Ms. Kotami on that one. The first one is an obvious one, and we could not avoid it as we are still in, even though we hopefully we go from a pandemic to an endemic situation, but nevertheless, we cannot avoid the question of, has the COVID pandemic contributed in any sense in slowing down or accelerating this transition to renewable, sustainable energy? So I would really like to have your views on that. And on another one also, which is a little bit of a more of an, let's say, a social component also, is the energy transition inclusive, and or can we make it inclusive as well? What would be your thoughts on those? So maybe we can do another round, and I would this time I would like to start with Ms. Kotami, if you don't mind. Thank you. You are still muted, so please unmute your mic. Ms. Kotami, you hear me? Your mic is still not, you're still muted, sorry. No, it doesn't work. Yes, now it should work. Did you hear my question?
So please, could you ask me again, because something wrong with us?
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Mike, it's a double question actually. One is on the if the COVID pandemic has had an impact on the transition, on the speed of the transition. Has it accelerated it, or has it slowed it down? And on the other side, can we assure that the energy transition will be inclusive? If we could have your thoughts on that, and then we will make a round. Thank you.
Okay.
Like this, you're muted again. Okay. Maybe can we start with Ms. Tan then, and then we'll see later. You are also muted. Okay.
I think Miss Kotami is trying to speak. We can't hear. Oh, okay.
No, we cannot hear her.
I think pandemic really helps to shape up everybody's resilience, right? I think before pandemic situation, we actually take things for granted. Even the simple act of going to a coffee shop, we just took it for granted and we go to coffee shop. Today, we want to go coffee shop. Well, so much trouble. You need to be vaccinated. You need to show your trace together. Otherwise you are caught, this and that. So difficult. I think same goes for preparation for skill change, job change, and all that. We definitely need to be more productive than before. In the past, as long as you can afford, you can hire as many workers as you can. Today, you are not only restricted by the number of workers, you are also restricted by the space that you have, the distance that you need to be next to each other, the mask that, okay, in Singapore, it's compulsory to wear masks, right? The mask that we wear, the physical tolerance that we have to go through because of the pandemic, safe distancing and all that. So with all these controls in place, what it actually means is we have to really become innovative, work on more productivity improvements. What used to need people to do, can we replace it with robots? Can we replace it with a more efficient way of doing things? Like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, a drone, digitalize some of our activities, engaging in predictive maintenance or using data analytics to teach the way that we work rather than just doing it with a lot of manpower. So all these are skills that we need to develop so that we are ready for a workforce that is no longer taken for granted. And as we go from pandemic to endemic, the sustainability of the workforce is also very important to us. So I think we will be on a continuous learning journey. And with the key point is about productivity and efficiency.
Okay. Dr. Song, you want to come in?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, this is a very important question. So COVID, pandemic, now we expect it's going to be endemic. And I think that COVID somehow increased our awareness of addressing big issues the world is facing, including climate change. I believe actually the public becomes extremely aware now of the bigger crisis facing the world, not only the pandemic, but also the climate change. So this is a good thing, the silver lining of the pandemic. But on the other hand, this pandemic also, it shows the resilience of the society, but on the other hand, it also shows the world is really not prepared, was not prepared for pandemic. And the world is also not prepared for the climate change, addressing the climate change. Now this awareness has increased, and I think the world economy, private sector, public sector also now started responding to tackling climate change in the coming years. So we are seeing, even without carbon pricing, even without the carbon border taxes introduced in Europe, yet it's already discussions themselves. It's already alerted the private sector, and the private sector actually now has reduced its investment in fossil fuels. Many companies reduced the investment in fossil fuels. This is one of the reasons why we got this global shortage of the gas, because no investment in the past. But this is a good thing, actually. So this is actually the private sector is responding to the requirement of the climate change. So we are reducing investment into fossil fuels, even with temporarily increasing in coal prices, in the gas prices, but no new investment, and then to push the investment into renewables. So this is all good things in the long term, but in the short term, so the adverse impact of the pandemic and adverse impact of this energy transition, they combine together. they compound each other, which means this would have a very adverse impact on the world economy and on people's life. This is where what you mentioned, then we need inclusive energy transition. We need a just transition into the green economy. So we cannot leave people behind, poor people, vulnerable people behind. We need to include everybody into this transitioning picture. And this energy access actually is quite important. We need to have a balance. On the one hand, we need to cut the consumption of the coal, but on the other hand, we also need to help developing countries to expand the energy access. As I mentioned, 150 million people in Asia, mostly in South Asia, they don't have energy access. They don't have electricity. Then, so in the short term, I think there's an argument. They still need some fossil fuels to help them to provide energy, to provide electricity to those vulnerable groups and the poor people. So this just transition and inclusive transition is really important. I pause here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Jean-Paul, you want to come in on this one as well, on the inclusiveness and on the COVID pandemic? So muted. Jean-Paul, you are still muted. We cannot hear you.
Sorry. No, Dr. Song just mentioned that the COVID crisis has shown both the resilience of our societies, but also the unpreparedness. And that goes for the climate issues and the climate crisis as well, but to a far larger extent. We need to take our population on board, educate them about the difficulties of addressing and the challenges of addressing the climate issue. But at least in Europe, I believe that this summer, the combination of both COVID and heavy storms and some rains that we did not experience in previous years, with all the damages linked to it, have risen the awareness among Europeans that climate change is a real issue. And I was listening when Dr. Song was talking about the job losses and the impact of going green as having the similar macroeconomic impact as the oil crisis in the 70s. And I was just wondering, what about the negative impacts and the shock on our economy by natural disasters, raising seawater levels, hurricanes, and so on? Here comes a tremendous cost at us we have to face, and that our economies have to absorb as well, and where they have to invest massively in repairing damages that are being caused. And of course, bringing electricity to all the people that do not have access right now is, of course, a challenge for certain countries and certain areas. But here again, should we not take advantage of the new technologies that are at hand and do what we did when we brought phones to regions where phones were not available before because there were no landlines, and jump the level of the fixed landline telephone and went straight away for cellular phones? And why not do the same now in in electricity, forget about the coal-powered heavy investment, heavy grids, and move straight away to solar, biomass, especially in Asia here, where biomass is abundantly available, and go straight away to decentralized renewable sources of electricity, and forget as soon as possible about expanding coal-fired heavy equipment and massive transmission lines.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. So we have one last question, and I'm happy to see that Ms. Kotami is back.
Yes.
All right. So we have a last question that I would, but Ms. Kotami, I will first give you the floor. So please feel free to answer the previous ones as well. But there is also a question that we have from the public on the compensation of green jobs. I think it is linked, of course, to what we discussed before on the training, and if you're highly trained, of course, also green jobs will pay well, I guess. But it's true, of course, we have this image of oil and gas jobs, especially when they're offshore, that people are extremely well paid there. But so the question was a little bit, how can we find the balance between those two? So what can we do to have green jobs better compensated, and then therefore also attract more people into the sectors? So that is the question. So we make a last round. So if you have anything else to add, please feel free to do so. And I would give first the floor to Ms. Kotami. So you can reply to these questions as well as any other thought that you may have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for just every time that's something wrong. Yes, I would like to back to that question that you mentioned about the COVID. So generally is that the society, that's COVID changed also its lifestyle also. That we know that people need to adapt with the change, with the same as energy. We need to productivity and efficiencies in the energy. As well as include addressing the climate change. We should start with to fight with the crisis and to be prepared with all the pandemic. So that importantly, that the fossil is still is the main source for the ASEAN countries. Therefore, that we need to look in the long term on the energies security. So how can we combine energy security and climate change together? So especially in Laos, is still developing country that we still a lot of supported how to stand by the oversource in terms of energy securities. We also look for the connectivity that we could utilize our green energy into the optimizations. So that's my response for that's questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe Ms. Tan, I'll give you the floor. Please unmute.
Yeah, sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes, if you could just maybe on the compensation of green jobs, because the question that we had that traditionally oil and gas jobs are better paid. So what can we do to ensure that green jobs are well paid as well? So that we can, I suppose the question is how, so that we can attract people into those sectors. I think you should be well positioned for that.
I have to say I work for passion and job satisfaction. So people in the climate change sector and renewable energy sector knows that the prices are terribly low, the profits are low, but we are sustainable. So I think it's an interesting question. In my organization, I have about 100 people in Singapore, and a lot of them are actually oil and gas converts. So we actually did need career change for them. And it goes through the ranks, right? People who are, the guy on the machine, right up to my deputy. They are previously from Jurong Island, from our power plants, and they have come over. So I think the switch is not difficult. In fact, the oil and gas sector is very volatile. In good times, you have got extremely good bonus. In bad times, you have no jobs. For the green one, we are still ramping. There is still a lot of demand. I think when we are at the very beginning of the growth curve, like I mentioned earlier, people think that we are just making Lego, so you just put all the solar panel together. As long as the wires get connected, somehow the system works, it looks good. But we are moving into a phase of digitalization, innovation, how to do more with less and all that. So I believe there is more and more the need for other kinds of jobs, not only the unskilled, but also the skilled and the engineering and the innovation kind. So I think we are in that transition now. And I believe the more skilled labor, where people can bring innovation, patents, new productivity and new technology onto the table, they will be well paid. Because sustainability, climate change, net zero is on every CEO's lip. He has to do it. He has no choice. And I think just want to add on one more point is pandemic, or rather in my area of business, solar, I used to go to business owners and CEOs. They will ask me, don't disturb me with solar, can it be cheaper? Are you sure it can give me cheaper power? Today, the CEOs are asking, how can I do more solar? Because when pandemic struck, when COVID struck, people realized that interruption is real, and years later, when we are hit by climate change and climate issues, we're going to be hit by another interruption, and people start to be more worried and more receptive to renewable energy and climate change activities.
Yes, thank you. Jean-Paul, you want to say something on the on the compensation of the jobs?
As I mentioned before,
and any final thoughts, maybe? Also.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, of course, jobs are moving towards more highly skilled, more sophisticated, more digital. But the green economy and the circular economy also needs some of the more traditional jobs that we know already in the current economy. And then it's like before, you need training on the job. Even during our lifetime, we have seen jobs evolve, workers in need of acquiring new skills, of being trained with new tools, new equipment. So there's nothing new about training and education and learning during most of your working life. And as the previous speaker mentioned, most of her employees come from the oil industry, and they bring skills that are still valuable even in the new economy. So I'm convinced that this can be a fairly smooth process under two conditions. You need to start with people that have already a good basic education. That should not be an issue for most of our countries. And then you need heavy government involvement, because training costs money. You cannot leave this financial burden just on the companies alone or on the employee alone. It's essential for the government to embrace this new learning opportunities and help and support them, because otherwise the costs for our governments, our countries will be tremendous when we leave people behind, when they are unemployed. It's not just an economic and financial cost. It's also a societal cost and a human cost that society as a whole will somehow have to bear. So better invest right from the beginning into training and education and lifelong learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Finally, Dr. Song, some final words of wisdom for us?
Thank you very much. This is too important for a few words. I think about these compensation issues, people respond to incentives. So this carbon pricing definitely have to be introduced. When we have carbon pricing, then those fossil fuel energy would be highly priced. Then renewable would be produce decent profits for people to move to those sectors. And on the compensation, I think we have another important issue of compensation. Developed countries, they emit so much greenhouse gas in the process of industrialization in the past 200 years. So this is a stop issue. So rich countries have the responsibility to help developing countries to make such a transition inclusive, just, as well as smooth. So I think rich countries have the responsibility to transfer technology to developing countries. As Paul indicated, the developing countries can jump from the fossil fuel, huge coal-fired power stations to renewables directly. Then they need financing and they need technology. And our mechanism, energy transition mechanism, actually is going in that direction. We partnered with the donor government, including the US, European Union, and several European countries, as well as the private sector and the philanthropy stockholders, then to help developing countries to make such a transition and to help them to get the technology and the finance. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Song. These were indeed words of wisdom, and I think that we have around the panel, we have a large common views on all the issues that we have discussed. I am reminded by the organizers that we have only 5 minutes left. So I cannot obviously review everything that has been said, but I would really like everybody, to our panelists, but also our public, to have joined this discussion, which was, in my view, very rich and very helpful also for our common understanding. I also take it from the last words of Dr. Song that indeed that would be a nice next webinar on the responsibilities of who has to do what. But I think they will discuss that in Glasgow. So I'm sure that a lot of those points will come up. Again, I would just like to thank you all. I would also, of course, like to thank our team here to have organized that, as well as from the Singapore International Energy Week. I'm really happy and honored to have been able to do this today. So what is left to me is to wish you health, prosperity, and happiness, and stay healthy and safe. And hopefully we'll see each other some other time, maybe not only virtually. And all the best to you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.